Hello, everybody. My name is Peter, and I will be moderating tonight's telephone town hall with Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, representing Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. Congresswoman Dexter is excited to hear from you all for our 4th telephone town hall of the year. Now, if you would like to ask a question live, you can hit *3 on your phone. If you would like to subscribe to her newsletter, you can press *6, and a member of our team will take down your email. You can also subscribe directly from her website, dexter.house.gov. And please stay in touch on social media, following Rep. Dexter on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube. And again, to ask a question live, hit *3. Now, I'm very excited to introduce Congresswoman Dexter.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone. Congresswoman Maxine Dexter here. I am a physician, very proud mother, and honored to be the U.S. representative for Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. Thank you all for joining tonight's call. I'm very excited to take your questions. As Peter said, hit *3 to ask me a live question. And wow, it's been a day here in D.C. At 1 in the morning, House Republicans launched a hearing in the Rules Committee on their proposed budget, or more accurately, their billionaire tax scam. The House Rules Committee determines how and when bills move to the House floor. So the committee sets the terms for debate, amendments, and timing. Essentially, they are setting the rules of the road, so to speak. So in the dead of night, Republicans tried to jam their extreme bill through the Rules Committee to tee it up for a vote before the full House. And believe me, this was an act of cowardness. They set this hearing for the middle of the night, hoping no one would notice that the bill would rip away health care for 14 million Americans and enact the largest cut to food assistance in history, all to give tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy. There's no problem they're trying to fix. They just want to give tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy and, while they're at it, add at least $4 trillion to our deficit. They hoped no one would notice, but Democrats showed up and shined a light. I arrived at 4 a.m. this morning to testify and offered my 3 amendments. So if I stumble or if I sound tired, hopefully I don't, but I've been going strong for many, many hours now. In total, Democrats offered more than 500 amendments, I think 537 at the end of all this. And it looks like they're in recess right now. I just looked up to check. In total, these were to protect Medicaid, food assistance, and our public lands, among many other things. We dragged that hearing into the daylight through the day. It went on for 19 hours, and we never stopped fighting. Let me be clear. Democrats are in this for the long haul. We are absolutely united in our opposition to this budget. And meanwhile, the most extreme factions of the Republican caucus say the current proposed cuts don't go far enough. They want more. And Republicans in competitive districts, those who represent purple or red districts in blue states especially, are feeling the heat to reject them altogether. So now is not the time to let up. We must stay loud. And that's why I'm hosting this town hall tonight, to keep you informed, to take your questions, and to discuss where we're at in the process for the biggest GOP tax scam in history. And I know it can be exhausting to stay engaged, and there's contradictory information out there, but your persistence, your courage, and your engagement keep me fighting and going for Oregon every day in DC, and I'm here to answer your questions and clear as much up as possible. So if you're not already subscribed to my newsletter, please press *6, and a member of my team will take down your email to get you on our list. You can also visit my website directly, dexter.house.gov, to subscribe, and you can ask a question by hitting *3. Another way to stay up to date is connecting on social media. We've done a lot of it today. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Threads, and YouTube. Please follow me and stay up to date on what I'm doing. And thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and looking forward now to taking your questions.
Right. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Now I want to introduce one of Congresswoman Dexter's phenomenal caseworkers, Jeff. Our caseworkers are bilingual, and we offer translated materials.
Si desea un resumen de esta reunión o tiene alguna pregunta o si necesita ayuda con una agencia federal, no dude en ponerse en contacto con nuestra oficina al 503-231-2300. Gracias nuevamente a todos por estar aquí esta noche. Esperamos poder responder a sus preguntas y continuar con esta conversación.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Now on to our questions. First question is going to be from Kristen from Troutdale. One moment. All right. Kristen, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hi. I just wanted to say I appreciate you talking about this bill, and that's actually what I asked about. I and my wife are both on Medicaid. My wife has a very severe form of epilepsy where she has to be hospitalized in the ICU every time she has a seizure. Her medication is very important. All of her treatment, hospitalizations, everything is covered by Medicaid because we're low income. I know that Democrats are, talking about advocating for stopping this bill, but I want to know, what are we seriously doing? Like, we're seeing in the news that Trump is making visits to talk to the Republicans that are on the fence. It sounds like they've set a deadline for the 26th to have a decision on this. What are the steps that the Democrats can take to absolutely make sure that this bill is not going to get passed?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen, so much. And first, I'm sorry that you and your wife have had to go through this. Certainly, being an ICU doctor, I've taken care of people like your wife many, many times through my career, and I know how stressful it is and how important Medicaid is for patients in general, but especially with patients with severe chronic illnesses and challenges like epilepsy can be. So I'm glad that you have the care that you need and that she needs. And really, House Republicans are trying to enact the largest cut to Medicaid in American history so that they can fund tax breaks for the ultra-wealthy. There's really no problem here, except for they need more money for their tax breaks. And so what we are doing is shining a light on it, making sure that we fight every step of the way. As I said, there were 537 amendments today, many of them focused on the healthcare aspect of this enormously tragic and it's cruel. It's frankly corrupt in a lot of ways. This bill is a terrible, terrible thing. And so we want to make sure that people know what's in it. So we discussed each of these amendments today, and ultimately, Republicans are going to have to decide if they stand with the billionaires who don't need tax cuts, or they stand with their constituents who are deeply reliant on Medicaid, and showing that rural hospitals are going to close. Healthcare access across all of our states is going to decrease. When we close one clinic or one hospital in any state, it squeezes people into fewer and fewer options, and we already have access issues. So what we're doing is limited in the minority. I'm not going to lie to you. We want to be in the majority so that we can take care of people. But when you're in the minority, especially with Speaker Johnson tightly controlling the votes as he is, We have to try to get them to find their courage. We need 4 Republicans to break from the party. And we see fractures, whether it's the far right who is pushing for more absurd cuts, or the moderates who understand that they are really doing harm to their communities if they vote for this. And so we are really going to slow this down procedurally, personally, with social media, talking to reporters, talking to our constituents, doing town halls, trying to make sure that this doesn't see the light of day. And ultimately, no matter what passes out of the House, it has to go to the Senate. We know the Senate is going to change the bill, and then it'll come back to us for a final vote. And every step of this process, we need people to share their perspectives. So you staying loud, you making sure that we hear from you is important for me, and it's also important if you live in other districts or if you have other family members who can share their perspectives. There's really nothing else we can do right now. And I also want to say that there is misinformation rampant out there. There literally are news media sources that are saying that we're not cutting Medicaid, and that is patently false. The Congressional Budget Office it's a nonpartisan group, is very clear that the top 10% will grow their income 2 to 4% over the next 10 years, and the bottom 10% of Americans will lose 3 to 4% of their income. And we're talking about families who earn $30,000 to $40,000 a year or less. So this is really a tragic budget bill, and we need to do everything we can to fight it.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Now, up next, we have Tracy from Gresham. Tracy, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hello?
Hey, Tracy.
Okay. I wasn't sure I was on. Anyway, what I was curious about is, as someone who is on Social Security and Medicare, just like the last person, and have disabilities, kidney disease included, and I am living so concerned about them taking that not only away from me, but people who are in desperate need of Medicare and Social Security. What can I do as a person who's a Democrat, and how can I, in terms of reaching out, does it help for me to call Republican senators' offices and talk to them, or their admin team to pass on information? Is that at all helpful?
Yeah, so first, thank you, Tracy, and you, like many folks, especially with disabilities or kidney disease, fall into that dual eligible population of Americans who have Medicare and Medicaid, and that also is true for many of our seniors as they get into longer-term home care and nursing facility care. So there are many, many Americans who are in this dual coverage area where they're dependent on Medicare and Medicaid. So, and this, I want to be really clear. I represent everyone. I have many thousands of Republican constituents, and I want to be really clear that this is not a partisan issue. Healthcare access cannot be a partisan issue, that all of us need to care about keeping our communities healthy and secure, and having access to healthcare is foundational to that. We've been hearing from folks, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you deserve healthcare. That is true, but we are the only civil or nation that is rich and resourced and not providing full access to healthcare in the world. And we also have some of the worst health outcomes. So we as a nation have made a conscious choice not to provide universal healthcare. And that is foundational to why we're in this situation. If we all could agree that healthcare is a human right, this would be a non-conversation, that we all have agreed to that. So it's a value that we as Americans haven't established yet, and I hope that we will. So as far as what you can do to advocate, being here helps. I can't encourage people to do anything specifically, but certainly sharing your perspectives with people who have influence is important. Making sure that you find groups that align with your values, whether, it's the ACLU or Indivisible or Healthcare for All, or, there's lots of different groups out there who will also help. And making sure that you share your perspectives with your representative is also something that's always helpful. Calling other representatives can be helpful at times, but I'll just share that we really pay attention to our constituent calls. So I'm not necessarily advocating for or against calling other representatives, but I will say that when we get calls from people who are outside of our district, it's a lot less compelling for us than people who we take care of and are accountable to. So, but being clear with your family, with your friends, talking to them about what's going on. I'll share, Fox News was patently giving out false information in some of the coverage that I've seen recently. And I think that I'm feeling that with some folks who think that I'm lying, that Medicaid coverage is being taken away. A lot of folks think that it's just being taken away from people who are undocumented. There are no federal dollars going to cover undocumented people in this country right now. That is against the law. It's not happening. There's no food security or food assistance going to people who are undocumented. So that is not what's happening here. What's happening is, an attempt to say waste, fraud, and abuse is happening. There are not 14 million Americans who are abusing or wasting the system, and yet we are taking them off. So this is much more broad than just any sort of waste, fraud, and abuse. And people aren't getting rich off of $6 a day of food assistance. What we are doing here is just marginalizing people who are already struggling.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Now, up next, we have Mark from Portland. Mark, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hi there. Thank you for calling or setting this up. It's pretty exciting. I guess my step, everything is definitely focused on healthcare, but I'm just wondering, what are you doing? Kind of, I understand right now Medicaid is the chance of it being taken away for 13 million Americans is possible. Like, what are we doing to try and make so this healthcare system isn't as cruel as it currently is? Like recently my mom passed away 2 months ago from a condition that was completely preventable if she would have had access to healthcare. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around why people would be trying to take healthcare away, because unhealthy Americans can't work and can't make money. And Republicans tend to be the more fiscally minded, or they say they are. But an unhealthy America is like an unproductive one. So why is this not a starter for them? Because that means more people can work and less costs associated with healthcare. So yeah, just kind of how can we get away from having such a cruel system that lets people die just because they don't have access to care? Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Mark. And first, I'm just so sorry about the loss of your mom. I, too, lost my mom about 2 months ago, and similarly, it was a treatable condition if it had been caught earlier. So I'm just so sorry, and it resonates, and I certainly feel a lot of empathy for what you and your family are going through. I don't know why we can't align around this, and what you say is exactly right. When people have access to health care, they get preventative care, they get in sooner for illnesses or conditions that they have concerns about. They don't put it off because of the economic impact of going to the doctor or going to see someone in a clinic. It is really a value that we have not established as Americans, that everyone should have access to healthcare. And it is to our own adverse end, not just from a health perspective, but as you said, from an economic perspective. People who are working multiple part-time jobs often can't get 20 hours a week because once they get over that threshold, they're eligible for benefits. We know that people are getting it's harder and harder to pay premiums even with employment-associated health care. And the Affordable Care Act really opened up a lot of opportunities for people that the Republicans are trying to close with this bill. So we are making it harder for people to get access if this bill passes. And so what I think this may lead to is people understanding the impact of not having health care for people in the community. And we are currently at the lowest uninsured rate that we've had in history in Oregon. And we are now thinking about having to deal with turning our back on that. And it is absolutely to our worst outcomes, I think, as a society and as from an economic standpoint. So what I'm going to do is fight like hell against this bill, and then when we have more power in this chamber, I'm going to be continuing to work for healthcare reform. And I absolutely believe that healthcare is a human right, that we need to fight for a system that works for people, for patients in the center of it, with the healthcare system next. And special interests and insurers and others are not the primary drivers, and we've got to change that. We spend far more money than we need to get better outcomes, and it's because we prioritize special interests over people. So we as a nation have to make a decision here that we're going to fund healthcare, and then we're going to do it in a reliable and sustainable way. And I'm here for that. That is why I ran for office. Environment and healthcare reform are the two things that really drives me, as well as economic opportunity for our families. So I'm here for it. I certainly agree with you, Mark, that our system is cruel and it needs to be better. And I'll continue to work with you and everyone else who's interested to make sure that this comes to pass.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Now, before our next caller, we just want to pause and hear from everyone on the call. We know there is so much going on, from economic uncertainties to the cuts that the Rules Committee are hearing right now. But at every telephone town hall, Congresswoman Dexter wants to check in and ask, what is the number one issue you would like her to focus on in D.C.? You can answer using the keypad on your phone. Dial 1 for healthcare, 2 for the economy, 3 for democracy, 4 for housing, 5 for education, and 6 for something else. Again, we want to hear from every single one of you on this call. If you had to pick, what issue are you most concerned with? That's dialing 1 for healthcare, 2 for the economy, 3 for democracy, 4 for housing, 5 for education, and 6 for something else. Now, as we wait for responses to come in, we want to highlight again that if you need help with a federal agency, please do not hesitate to reach out to our office at 503-231-2300. Our caseworkers are bilingual and we offer translated materials.
Si desea un resumen de esta reunión o tiene alguna pregunta o si necesita ayuda con una agencia federal, no dude en ponerse en contacto con nuestra oficina al 503-231-2300. Gracias nuevamente a todos por estar aquí esta noche. Esperamos poder responder a sus preguntas y continuar con esta conversación.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share. I know people like to hear. We have almost 7,000 people on the line right now. I know we also have folks on Facebook streaming live, so I'm sure that we have well over 7,000 people. and we are really grateful for you letting us know what your top priority is. It's really helpful to hear this. I always talk about it after our town halls, and I'm committed to doing everything in my power to highlight your priorities. So right now, it's interesting. Democracy continues to be our number one issue, with 65% of you sharing that democracy is the top thing on your mind. And I was honestly expecting that healthcare was going to jump up there because we've been focused on it on this call, but it came in second, distant second, with 18% focused on that. Next is something else at 7%, followed by economy at 5%. And I do think it's really important to talk about democracy and the free press and First Amendment rights and the economy and corruption right now. So really grateful that folks haven't lost track that our democracy is really sick right now and we need to focus on taking care of it. I will continue to defend democracy from Donald Trump's actions, and these surveys give me a lot of fodder to make sure that I assert that my constituents want us to focus on our democracy and protecting it. But we need to do two things at once. Even with our democracy being sick and it being our top priority, we also have to build a better path forward. We can't just focus on fighting. We need to build a better vision for what we are going to offer. And that's why I'm focused on building an economy that empowers working families to thrive. Kids like me who grew up in a working class family that no one had gone to college need opportunity, need accessible higher ed, need well-funded public schools. And I'm focused on combating the climate crisis with the urgency our children deserve. And that feels so pressing right now with all the things we're talking about with drill, baby, drill, and giving pay-to-play opportunities for coal and gas. We just have to not lose sight of, what we can offer protecting our national parks and federal lands. And as one of 6 Democratic physicians in Congress, I'm working to make sure that health care is a fundamental right, as we just talked about recently on this call. So we can't lose sight of these goals and how we have to fight for our values and a better future. And I am going to fight to protect our democracy, because without that, the rest of it can't happen. But we must not just fight Donald Trump and the corruption and the threat to democracy. We have to build a better, more inclusive future for all of us.
Good. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Up next, we have Tanya from Portland. Tanya, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hello, Congresswoman. How are you?
I'm well, Tanya. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of the false information and propaganda that I feel to be propaganda that is showing up on the news, what would you suggest is the best way to maintain knowledge of what is really going on and what's not propaganda?
No, thank you. I love that question, Tanya. Before I went to medical school, I was a journalism and poli-sci double major, and I really came to understand profoundly that our journalists are our fourth branch of government. Our free press is foundational to a healthy democracy, and that is why Donald Trump is going after the free, unbiased press. We have had assaults on our national public radio and public broadcasting systems, and whether it's Sesame Street or NPR, we know that a free press that is independent of special interests is foundational to our democracy. So personally, I think that our national public radio is still a very reliable source. I absolutely think that we all have different local news sources. So whether you read the Oregonian or there's many different, Willamette Week and others across the district and, more broadly throughout Oregon. The Capitol Chronicle is doing really good work, and they have been really independently investigating stories in a way that I think is powerful. But, the social media is where a lot of folks, the majority of folks actually are getting their news these days. And we know those algorithms are self-serving and lead us to echo chambers. And if you, look at someone else's feed, it's very different than yours depending on what things you click on. And it reinforces our predisposed notions. It does not challenge our assumptions. And that is the danger of social media. When I was in journalism school, there were, certain things that you did. You never quoted someone without, verifying your source. And you didn't want to use a undisclosed source because people can say anything if their name isn't attached to it. Sorry about the silence. We're going to close the window here. But that integrity of journalism is not true for many of the sources that people are listening to, whether it's Rogan or Fox News. And you would think Fox would be doing it, but we know they're not. So we just have to be more thoughtful about what we do. And frankly, I think we need to resubstantiate our investments in a free and robust press. But that is a whole nother issue. But I think now that we see how sick our democracy is and how divided we are, I have no doubt that the media and the sources of our media is driving a lot of that. And so as a nation, I think it's time for us to really rethink how news is valued and our journalists are valued, and making sure that they've got the resources that they need so that people who care for unbiased information to be shared can find it. And that's kind of hard right now.
Great. Thank you, Congresswoman. Now up next, we have Mike from Gresham. Mike, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hi, Congresswoman Dexter. Thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Mike.
I'm a 35-year retired federal employee. I worked for the Forest Service for most of my career, and I am sort of surprised and quite dismayed that the Democrats have not developed their own flood the zone strategy to fight against the flood the zone strategy that the Trump administration is using. And here's a couple of ideas that have popped up that I've not seen any real pushback from the Democrats on what Trump has done. One of them is Trump has confessed at least 6 times, maybe more, on the air, on television, that the 2024 election was rigged, and that rigging enabled him to become president. Trump lied on camera numerous times that Medicaid was off limits and would not be cut, yet now there's a bill in Congress that he is pushing to cut $500 billion from Medicaid. And I'm kind of wondering, he also said Social Security is off limits, but I assume that's coming next. Today I submitted a letter to OPM because of their new rule where they're proposing to improve accountability for federal employees by enabling the administration to fire at will anyone that they decide they don't like for whatever reason. And that strikes me as extremely hypocritical, because Trump has hired so many totally unaccountable people to work for him who don't have the qualifications to do the work that they were appointed to do.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. No, Mike, I really appreciate that. First, for your service to our community. Our public service, our civil service has not been given the respect that they need. The Forest Service, the National Park Service, our Social Security workers, our food service workers, our food assistance service workers. We know that the quote-unquote bureaucrats that DOJ and others are trying to cut are the people who really kept our community served. And case in point, Social Security claims have slowed down by 25% since DOJ got involved. So we know that the civil service is extremely important to our community. So thank you for that. in response to like how are we responding to the Republicans flood the zone practice, I think that it's, this is a point of contention for a lot of Democrats. And I talk to lots of people, and they're frustrated that they don't see Democrats on the same message in the same way. And I would say that part of that is because we haven't invested in media outlets in the same way that Republicans have over time. There is a much more robust machine, more or less, for Republicans to get their message out. So for Democrats, even if we all are on the same message, which I feel like we have been hitting hard on this budget bill and the things that it does, and that it's giving tax breaks to billionaires on the backs of working families. I hear it everywhere I go, but it's me hearing it in my echo chamber because we haven't broken through the noise. And I just was talking to Representative Crockett today about this because she has broken through the noise in a lot of ways. And so I think we as Democrats need to rethink our media strategy and how we engage. But like it or not, attention is the currency of politics right now. And if you can't get attention, you aren't making a difference in a lot of people's mind. And that is not the traditional way that, Democrats didn't like to talk to reporters unless they knew the three things they were going to say and they were on message. People want us to be authentic and available and real. And so I think there's a real change in how Democrats are thinking about this, and it's showing. But I also think that part of this is that we lost this election, period. We lost it badly. And I think that we lost it because people don't believe that we're fighting for them. And part of that is because we were sticking to a singular message and not being as responsive to our districts. And so part of what we're doing is really representing our districts and not taking all the same votes and not saying all the same things, because my district, which is, heavily Democrat, is not going to have the same concerns as a purple district or a red district that has more conservative constituents. And we need to represent all of our constituents to the best of our abilities. So Democrats are learning how we can listen to our constituents, respond to them, and get our message out. And that's frustrating for people who see the machine that Republicans have and that we don't have something in response. And so we are working through this. I absolutely am available. We're doing town halls where we need you to share your voices as much as you can with us and your thoughts and your concerns. But we have to show up and be in community and be responsive. And that foundationally is going to help us flood the zone from our own perspectives and response.
Wonderful. Thank you, Congresswoman. Up next, we have Cyrus from Portland. Cyrus, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hello, I'm Cyrus Stark. I'm a honors student at OSU, and in my studies, I've come across some interesting things. Actually, has a bit to do with the last couple questions you heard. One of which is how the closer proximity there is between the community and leadership, the more compassion leadership generally has to their community, and the other side of it being how we underemphasize narratives in this country and like to throw around facts and beat each other over the head with facts, and we're sort of losing the narrative portion. And I heard you throw social media under the bus and that sort of thing, and how there's been, I know for me personally, there's been a bunch of people who've been saying the same thing, that we just need to take advantage of social media, enter some of these spaces that are already set up. Like I saw Pete Buttigieg on known Republican podcasters and as well as others. So I'm wondering, when are Democrats going to stop making excuses for why we're not challenging these narratives in these ways, and when are they going to actually start challenging these narratives in a way that builds proximity to Republican voters and people that really need to hear these messages?
Right. Well, Cyrus, first, thank you. I would argue that I wasn't throwing social media under the bus. So I'm sorry if that's the perspective. I obviously didn't communicate my intention as clearly as I wanted to. I think that social media predisposes us to fulfilling our predisposed notions, but it is absolutely fundamental. And what I hope people hear is that we do need to be authentic. We need to show up where people are. We need to be responsive to our constituents. And social media, better or worse, is where people are, and that's where they're getting their news. So I am very engaged on social media. Am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. I am still learning, and we are flexing this muscle, but I think it is an important communication medium, but it is not where people should be getting their news. I think these are two different things. And current events and responding to people and engaging socially is absolutely how we should be using it. So being authentic, not being afraid to go, on Fox News, or not being afraid to go on Joe Rogan, that is absolutely something that our Democrat Party needs to do. And Pete Buttigieg is a great example of that. So I appreciate that you brought him up, because he has been masterful at going on, more conservative stations and connecting with voters. And we've got to do that 100%. But what we need to do is hope and fear are the two most driving emotions for people, and right now there's a lot of fear, and I would argue that hope is where I want to sit. That's what I want to instill in people. I certainly feel like I'm doing a lot of talking about Donald Trump and the threats, and I want to be able to pivot and share what my vision is for the future and why I care and why I gave up my career as a physician to take care of my community in this way. So that is what we're trying to get across on our social media platforms. I'm certainly open, Cyrus, to your perspective on how I can do better, and also anyone else out there. Like, your perspective is key. And I think something else I heard you say, is that, telling stories in narrative form that really is resonant with people and not using just data and facts and figures is important. And I totally agree with you. People remember how you make them feel, not what you said. And so making sure that people understand that I do care about how they're feeling, that I do want them to thrive, not just survive, that I do want a community that's resilient and healthy, and that, our children have hope for the future. Those are all very foundationally important, and how we can show that is by telling stories and telling, the stories of real people and getting them, to engage with us. So I will take that feedback that I need to be more clear about what I'm trying to do with social media and the distinction from news and, the information that we need to keep our voting sort of minds completely informed, or as informed as possible, but getting our hopeful vision for the future out there is going to be through social media and storytelling. And so I am committed to it and look forward to hearing people's thoughts on how I can do it better.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Up next, we have Allie from Portland. Allie, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Hi, Congresswoman. Thanks so much for taking my call, and I really wanted to also say we really appreciate everything that you're doing for us here in Oregon. I'm a school psychologist in Portland, and I was wondering what you guys are doing in Congress to help support our kiddos who just lost the school-based mental health grant. It's a federal grant that supported many districts across Oregon. This is not only just healthcare, but supports our students' well-being and emotional growth. And I think, there's just millions of dollars lost in this on top of the budget cuts that have already happened in Oregon, where we've lost mental health support statewide, as well as supports for personnel losing their jobs due to the budget cuts.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Allie, and for one, being there with our kiddos and making sure that they have the support that they need, or at least we're trying. As many people know, I have two kids, and they're 18 and 21, so they went through public schools, and I was literally just talking with them this weekend as one of them graduated from college, is that there is profound anxiety and stress and depression through this generation that is just really disproportionate to, I think, anything that I have ever seen or experienced as a healthcare provider or as an individual. So now is the worst possible time to be pulling these federal grants that support mental health for our kids. What we know is that having access to a mental health provider that you have a relationship with, have easy access to, and have trust with is really important for people feeling safe, talking about, whether it's addiction or suicide or just being stressed by a bully or feeling, stressed about having to read aloud in class. Like, these are things that really matter for our kids, and having embedded mental health workers in each and every school is something that should be not just a goal, but an expectation for our schools, and now more than ever. So what are we doing? Right now, our federal government is cutting grants left and right, and we are fighting this in the courts. We are fighting it in, the public sphere, and we certainly are fighting for it in legislation. We just had our Mental Health Awareness Day yesterday. We were wearing green. We were making sure that we were talking with our mental health advocates. Representative Salinas is the co-chair of our bipartisan mental health caucus. We are going to continue to elevate this, and it is a bipartisan issue. And I've been working on addiction issues with our students and, at the high school and college level through Oregon. And I know that many of my colleagues, especially Rep. Reynolds Senator Reynolds and Senator Patterson and many others are thinking and working on this too. So we need to partner at every level, whether it's the Multnomah MESD, all of a sudden I'm blanking on Educational Service District, whether it's MESD at the very local level or it is the state or the federal grants, we have to prioritize our kids and mental health, and it can't be an add-on to healthcare. It has to be foundational to healthcare, and I will fight for that. I'm glad that you are working towards it, Allie, and whatever I can do, please make sure that your schools know that where you work, that I want to hear from you, and we just need to keep partnering, and I will absolutely fight for those kids to have the access to healthcare they need.
Great. Thank you, Congresswoman. Up next, we have Carrie from Boring. Carrie, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman Dexter, for having this conversation. I am going to talk a little bit through, I work with cancer patients, so I'm going to talk through the cancer patient lens. I know we've already talked a lot about the potential cuts for Medicaid tonight, and then obviously the cuts to research funding, biomedical research funding. But one of the things that has come up is the potential for adding work requirements to Medicaid eligibility. And obviously, already stated on the call by one of your constituents from Troutdale who shared her wife's medical, she's not going to be able to have a work requirement to continue on her medical care with Medicaid if that was going to become something. So my question is this what you're hearing, and do you see this as a potential path to prevent some of the cuts to get it through? And I guess just what are you hearing about adding those work requirements to Medicaid eligibility?
Yeah, so it's become a talking point for my Republican colleagues that there are people who are able-bodied and not working. In fact, Representative Norman in Rules Committee was really talking about like the value of work and that people don't have that in the United States anymore. And I would just argue very vehemently that that is absolutely not the case. In fact, most of the patients I knew were working 40 to 60 hours a week just trying to make ends meet if they could. And those who can't because they have a disability or because they have a child with a disability or a partner with a disability or they're caring for their aging parents or they are a single parent with kids at home who can't take care of themselves and need a parent to be home. You can't get childcare that is affordable on a minimum wage or even a $20 an hour wage. So we know that people want to work and are working as much as they can, but these work requirements they're a red herring. We don't have people getting rich off of not working and getting Medicaid. That is absolutely not what's happening. And there is already extensive paperwork necessary for finding out if people are eligible for Medicaid. Or Medicare is a guaranteed support that we have. That is also in jeopardy right now. $500 billion could be cut from Medicare because of the deficit that we are growing. So many different threats right now to our healthcare. But fundamentally, we understand that work requirements are just paperwork requirements, and they're talking about doing it every 6 months instead of every year. And what that means is that people will fall off of the Medicaid rolls because they don't have time to fill out pages and pages and pages of paperwork every 6 months. And we don't have the people in administrative positions who can do all that paperwork. And we haven't invested in informational technology that allows people to do this easily and efficiently. So this is a path towards cutting people off Medicaid, period. It is a tactic that has been used. There are not that many people who are wasting or abusing the system. It is 14 million people are not abusing the system. They are going to be lost because they can't keep up with the paper requirements. And I would just say it's paperwork requirements, not work requirements. So thank you for understanding that. It is a tactic for cutting people off Medicaid, and we are fighting it every step of the way right now. And also, I just want to say that our cancer patients are really hurting because of the cuts to investigative clinical trials. Clinical trials are sometimes the last option for my lung cancer patients when, the treatments that we had weren't working. My mom died of lung cancer. I just feel like we are not just taking away Medicaid, but we're taking away the research that allows us to have opportunities for people to get treated. So thank you for your work with cancer patients, and please send information to my team about what we can do specifically for your community of patients, because we really do want to understand what the impact is here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Okay, so thank you all for joining us tonight. We have late breaking news right now. I'm going to need to step away because Republicans are now reconvening on the House floor to take up this terrible bill, the GOP tax scam. I will just make sure you understand Democrats are using every tool at our disposal to block consideration of this bill, and I need to go to the floor right now to cast my vote. You can join on C-SPAN and see it for yourselves if you'd like. Like I said, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to the House floor to fight for Oregon values, to protect our health care, to protect food assistance, to protect our federal lands and our environment. I'm so grateful for you all coming tonight, for knowing that democracy is still your top priority. We had over 7,000 people here, and please attend my next in-person town hall Saturday, May 31st at 11 a.m. at Mount Hood Community College at the Yoshida Event Center. I really hope to see as many of you as possible in person so we can talk about what happens tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to my team to kind of finish us out, but really, really grateful, and I will talk to you all soon. All right. Well, again, just thank you everyone so much for joining. The Congresswoman is having to run off to vote right now, but we just very much appreciate you all taking this evening to join us, and hope you will be able to join her Saturday, May 31st at 11 a.m. at the Mount Hood Community College Yoshida Event Center. And I hope you all have a fantastic and wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.